Well, if you study this disease and what led to its appearance in humans, several things become apparent. The first is that the reservoir for the infection was found to be a fruit bat. In fact, a fruit bat from a genus of bats known as Pteropus, pictured here. Now, what I mean by reservoir is that there are many animals in the world that have infections that can get into humans that don't show signs of infection when they are in fact infected with whatever causes the infection themselves. And in the case of Nipah virus, these bats were infected with the virus but showed no symptoms. Now, these bats, as is pictured here, live in trees. And one thing you have to know about trees in Southeast Asia, where they live, as pictured here, is that there's been tremendous amounts of deforestation over the past 20 years. Now, let me explain this map to you. It's fairly straightforward, although it may not look that way. Green countries are countries with net afforestation. Red countries are countries with net forest loss. Now, the pie graphs within each country tell you exactly what the forests are. But as you can see, in the regions in which these bats live, there's in fact been significant deforestation. The height of the country coming off the map is proportional to the amount of forest gain or forest loss. What has been driving the forest loss in Southeast Asia? This is a picture of Borneo. These are all palm fruit tree plantations, and you can see the forest cover in Borneo between 1950 and today. There's been net loss of approximately half of Borneo's forest, and that pace is continuing, largely for the production of palm fruit trees. The major use of these, of course, is for fuel. Palm fruits are also being increasingly used for cooking oil in the wake of trans fat bans in the developed world. Now, the consequences of deforestation are not only just that they decrease the habitat for these bats, but in fact it concentrates their populations. Now, if you were in charge of managing the H1N1 epidemic, would you take one person you knew who was sick and put them in a room with a small room with 100 other people who you knew weren't sick? Or would you take them and put them in a room by themselves? Well, you don't have to tell me the answer, because I know what you're thinking. But in fact, what we're doing with wild species, and including these bats, is we're taking any bat that may be a reservoir for viruses such as Nipah virus and putting them in that small room with 100 of their uninfected friends. So one of the things that may have led, and there's not particularly good evidence to this in this case, but certainly given the circumstances is worth considering, may have led to the emergence of this disease is the concentration of the virus in bats. Now, there are other concentration problems with deforestation, this being one of them. So as I mentioned, Nipah virus broke out on a pig farm. Bats became concentrated in trees. Forests were cleared not only for palm fruit trees, but also for pig farming in Malaysia. The pace of pig farming went up exponentially during the period directly preceding the outbreak, and you'll see here that the number of pigs went down drastically between 1998 and 1999. Why was that? It's because the bats infected the pigs, and unlike bats, pigs die from Nipah virus. And it turns out that, in fact, the way humans got the infection was by getting it from pigs. Bats not only were enticed to come into pig farm areas where humans were farming pigs by the fact that they had less habitat and then interface between humans and wildlife increases, but farmers in the region decided that it would be a good idea to raise a cash crop in addition to their pigs, which was mango trees, which, if you're a fruit bat, is lunch. So here we have a unique assembly of factors that led to the emergence of an infectious disease that in some ways were entirely improbable and unpredictable. And yet we've seen examples such as this with SARS and other infections in which several different ecological barriers to an infection coming into humans have been broken down and essentially opened the door to passage of an infection into human beings. Now here's another example. This is a slide that shows the distribution of cases of H1N1, a virus that I'm sure everyone in the room is familiar with. H1N virus has been confirmed in 213 countries, 17,700 deaths. And one question we should all be asking ourselves is, can we learn anything about how this virus came into humans? And I'm here to tell you that this is an example of when pigs fly. And you may think that it's impossible for pigs to fly, but in fact that's exactly what's going on with H1N1. The flu virus, the H1N virus that has taken over the world, has genes from ducks, humans, and pigs. And in fact, one of the key gene segments that led to the emergence in humans is a gene from a pig. And this has raised mass speculation about the role of industrialized pig production in the emergence of this disease. This is a map from early in the 20th century showing the production of hogs, each dot representing 100,000 pigs. And this is a map, the same map from today. And what you'll notice is that the density of pig production, or at least where it's occurring, is almost identical with Southeast Asia, and particularly the area where Nipah virus emerged, being relatively dense. Now, we don't have good evidence about whether or not the viral segment that ultimately came into the H1N1 virus from pigs occurred on a pig farm. And we don't have that information because, in fact, most pork operations, including those in Malaysia and those around outside of Mexico, Malaysia, where Nipah virus emerged, and those outside Mexico City, actually it's a city way out here, Mexico City is this big dot, but the first case of H1N1 occurred about there, do not monitor for influenza virus in swine because it's considered a normal pathogen. So we, in fact, have no idea where these viral strains are coming from. But with the H1N1 virus, the issue with biodiversity may not be, in fact, this flying pig virus. I mean, you've got bird, pig, human, and this mixing of species, that's the real issue. This is a fascinating study that was published in Science in 2007, and what this study endeavored to do was to map human travel across the planet by boat and by car. And each one of these red lines is essentially a travel path of a boat or a car witnessed over a period of time in that year. And what you can see is that there are very few parts of the Atlantic Ocean here and the Pacific Ocean here that are not traversed by humans. And indeed, most of Europe, Sub-Saharan Africa, South America, etc. So how does H1N1 get from Mexico City all over the world? Well, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to see that we've got ample opportunity to spread it. Compare that map to this map, which is a map of the major flyways around the world for migratory birds. And you'll see that their pathways are mostly north-south. Our pathways are mostly east-west. I'll let you ponder that comparison. Now, it's impossible, really, to talk about the things that underlie the potential for diseases to emerge, or in fact, for the broader issue of what contributes to biodiversity loss, if you don't think about population growth. This is a map of population of the planet in the year 1000, and as time goes by, you'll see that we have, in fact, become more populous and spread out across the world in great numbers. And so if you think about the two main contributors of biodiversity loss, which are habitat loss and climate change, when you see illustrations like this, it's not terribly hard to figure out why we're losing habitat one, but in fact that as we the thing that has enabled us to become so populous and so widespread is in fact the technology that is producing our carbon emissions.